I love video games. I also love speedrunning. Now, while this may be the cause of whatever the hell is going on in my brain, speedrunning games is just cool. People speedrun everything they can find, from watching plastic ducks in a pond to a calculator app. In the past couple of years, speedrunning has just exploded. But despite that, it's something completely different when game developers go out of their way to make it very clear they want you to just speedrun their game. The hassle of actually setting up a speedrun, submitting it, and then proving you didn't cheat is kind of annoying for people like me, who are lazy. But it also allows the developers to get kind of creative with how they implement the speedrun of their game. Now, me personally, my philosophy on life is go fast and make cash, but I don't go very fast and I don't have a whole lot of cash. So when I can at least be encouraged to go fast, then I'm happy. So without further ado, I want to talk about speedrunning modes in video games. Holy shit, he just said the name of the video. First of all, I think I should define what a speedrun mode even is. Now for me, I consider it to be something either very basic, like just a timer somewhere that you don't have to manually manage, or something more casual and creative, like time trials in Mario Kart. Speaking of Mario Kart, since the first one, there's always been some sort of time trials mode. Now don't get me wrong, lots of other racing games have good time trials mode. Mario Kart, I think, does it best though. At least after Mario Kart 64. This was the first game to introduce the ghosts that drive around the track representing the best time, and I think it's a very cool way to give an incentive to get better at the course and the overall game. There's just something that makes my brain click when I can see a visual representation of my best run that activates my ultra gamer instinct of must beat time ooga booga. But as creative and innovative as the ghosts were, Nintendo also kind of fucked up on Mario Kart Wii, requiring you to beat the expert staff ghost to unlock Funky Kong, which isn't that hard, but also Funky Kong is Funky Kong and he should be the only character in the game. I don't feel like a speedrun mode should be required, as long as it's not the whole point of the game. And Mario Kart 8 handled it a lot better, with giving the gold tires to those who are actually good at the game, still incentivizing it, but not requiring it to unlock a specific character. Now while Mario Kart is a prime example of the whole idea of this video I'm making, there are a lot more games that do this a lot differently. And arguably one of the first games to encourage a speedful approach is another Nintendo game, Metroid. I'm guessing you had to have a copy of the Nintendo Power magazine to actually know about it, but depending on how fast you beat the game, you'd see a different version of Samus at the ending. Regular full suit Samus if you beat it in over 10 hours, Samus without her helmet if you beat it under 10, and whoa, what the fuck, Nintendo? This is the kids game. Anyway, aside from the so-called reward for beating the game underneath 3 hours, the actual game itself just worked for speedrunning, and you didn't have to do whatever the hell this is. You can't just plop a timer in any old game and call it speedrun worthy, because in reality, a lot of games just don't really fit that. But the gameplay of Super Metroid, oh my god, it's so good. It's so damn good. What makes Metroid stand out from the other games, besides the fact that it aged phenomenally, is that most of it you don't even have to play. For a lot of the games coming out around the time of the NES and SNES, they're very linear in order to cram the small games into the small cartridges and extend the gameplay as much as possible so they can make as much profit. But with Super Metroid, they put a lot of focus on this one core thing that would be everywhere in the future of video games, especially open worlds. An objective, with optional content alongside it. Not as catchy as I wrote. In the game, you can reach the end after defeating the 4 bosses hanging around on planet Zebus. Besides some key items for traversal and beating the bosses, all the other content is purely just to take the edge off of the game for those who need it. And this is where the speed part of the game comes in. If you're playing the game for the first time, there's no way you're gonna beat it in under 3 hours. But instead, some fucking genius at Nintendo decided to make the game have a little thing called replayability, which I'll get further into later. But it adds an incentive to us speed goblins to memorize the map and strategize routes, which for the time was really interesting and not a lot of games had done this already. A lot of the older Nintendo games had this sort of maze design with lots of content purely for rounding off that edge. And I think it's genius to put a timer and incentive to beat the game fast, because that structure just is really cool to speedrun. But anyway, despite just the speedrun mode, the gameplay, like I said, aged like fine wine. So did the speedrun. But at roughly the same time we saw Super Metroid, we saw another game which would have a little bit of an impact on the speedrunning community. Just a little bit. Doom. Doom was a bit more unorthodox with how it introduced speedrun to players. Aside from the built-in par timer, which on its own is actually really cool and we'll see more of later, it did so by introducing the LMP file, which if you're not pro hacker gamer like myself, it's essentially a file that tracks the movements of the player, which could be recorded inside the game and shared with others to create a whole speedrun community in a time where the internet wasn't very mainstreamed. If you want more about speedrunning in general and less about the modes in video games, then I highly suggest you watch this video by Jake. It highlights a lot of what I'm talking about plus more. Anyway, what Doom and Super Metroid both have in common is that they both are easy-ish to pick up, but really complex in mastering and optimizing, which is perfect breeding ground for speedrunning bacteria. Okay, that sounds gross, maybe don't word it like that. Doom has this gameplay defined as a movement, which, if you don't know, feels good to go fast in, because that's what it's made for. It's always chucking random shit at you, and if you're good, you never have to stop. It's always about that flow state, which is reached when you can just fly through levels and make it look like nothing. Out of the two games I just mentioned, Doom was just built for speedrunning. It also follows the same line as Super Metroid. If you know what you're doing, you can just absolutely beeline these games. But otherwise, it's just a normal playthrough. If you've played any of the Doom games, you're definitely aware of the feeling it gives you. And no, I don't mean the power fantasy. Where the typical boots-on-the-ground FPS has a much slower and linear form, Doom makes you feel like you're speedrunning. IGN, hire me. In each room you're presented with waves of enemy, and with one simple trick, it makes playing the game just feel so fucking good. Removing the reload escalates that sort of flow state into the heavens, turning this gameplay from bleh into It's more of a game about improvising than just clicking heads, stringing together these weapon combos just to try to get through the group of enemies as fast as possible. And alive as possible, more importantly. The idea of go fast zoom, though, is not something exclusive to a set style of game design, and this is the part of the video where I get kinda lost. You see, a lot of games nowadays do have a speedrun timer option, but it's sort of kinda more just a fun novelty you play once, which I mean, yeah, is fine, but also I ain't gonna pay the YouTube bills with novelties. What really separates something like the timer mode in Last of Us or Portal from the same in the Resident Evil series is one little thing called replay value. When talking about replay value in games, despite good replayability being commonly discussed as something what makes a game great, one of, if not my favorite games of all time has zero replay value and is still fucking brilliant. So this isn't to say that having bad replay value is a bad thing. But also, the idea of a sort of speedrun challenge mode can take these more linear, unreplayable games and turn them into very replayable games. And I don't think there's a better example than in the Resident Evil franchise. Now I'm gonna be completely honest, I haven't played these modes myself extensively, but it's just something that fits the gameplay of Resident Evil. At first glance, it's kind of linear and very story-based, but on the second playthrough, a lot of the shock factor is gone, and this is the perfect time for Mr. Timer over here to come in. Expanding on what I said earlier, I find to make an interesting speedrun who has more casual people to pull off doesn't lie within all the crazy clips and super swims and various forms of witchcraft, but rather the routing. And again, much like I said about Doom and Super Metroid, Resident Evil is all about the routing. From what I've seen, the average time to beat the game is around double what the achievements ask you to beat the time under. And I feel this time alone really shows how much of the game you just don't have to play. There's something just so rewarding about memorizing this labyrinth and personally pinning down what materials you need, what is required, and what to skip over. It doesn't really add up to anything besides to get some gamer points to show off to all the ladies who definitely care about a useless number next to your name. It's still cool to see how slower your first run was compared to you just absolutely destroying these games. The only real simplified part of the speedrun is how the timer reverts instead of causing an immediate reset of the entire game. I essentially mainstream speedrunning without making it a massive grind. And don't get me wrong, speedrunning is all about that practice and is something very, very impressive on its own, but also, I'm just me. Resident Mischievous isn't the only game to have great speedrun ability, or in other words, there's Celeste. Out of most of the other games I've talked about, Celeste certainly has a very straightforward and not very interesting take on speedrunning. Instead, what makes it really interesting is how the game stems from the desire to go fast. When making the game, the devs themselves were speedrunners, and this led to making intentional exploits in order to gain speed for those more advanced players. So what really makes a speedrun for Celeste interesting is that besides a couple glitches, most of the run is purely based off that flow state, seemingly weaving through all the obstacles, performing these insane fucking Street Fighter combos on your controller just to fly through the stage without stopping. And the worst part about it is that I think I could do it just from how easy it is to see what's going on. But in actuality, it took me an hour to beat one of the levels. Celeste may not be an easy game to speedrun or to play in general, but it sure as hell was built for it. It's not as mainstreamed as Resident Evil, but it's fucking amazing to watch. Oh no, but what is a game that combines going fast and memorizing routes? Oh no, it's Big Todd. What you seek is the game called Oh wow, Big Todd, thanks for telling me to play the game. There's something about movement shit, specifically the ones that are perfect to include a speedrun mode, like Titanfall. Why didn't you include a speedrun mode to Titanfall? Okay, I have a lot to say about Titanfall. Okay, there's something you should know about me though. It's that I fucking love movement shit. The way ULTRAKILL handles speedrunning is like a combination of what I just talked about. The gameplay of ULTRAKILL is just... Can I talk about ULTRAKILL? Okay, this is the ULTRAKILL video, but no more speedrunning. It's all based off this incentive of fucking styles, yo. It's like Tony Hawk, but he has 30 guns, and is a robot, and goes to hell. Back in the Doom series, there is this mechanic called weapon chaining, because it would be more efficient to pull off combos with a variety of weapons instead of just one. ULTRAKILL takes this and turns it into a mechanic. The more you use a weapon, the less damage it does, but by quickly switching between an array of weapons, you get this really nice damage bonus. And you also get a multiplier for either jumping or sliding, encouraging movement at all times. What separates it from the weapon chain in Doom is just the sheer goddamn mass of weapons the game gives you. You got this pistol, you throw a coin up and fucking goes. Massive rail cannon that in combination with the shotgun makes this fucking... a saw launcher that just... There isn't any best combo when playing the game. Each weapon is more treated as a tool that can set you up for the next combo. It's the kind of game that truly embodies that flow state I mentioned earlier, like Doom. The movement at a glance is simple, but underneath there's so much tech to be learned, most of which is intentional, like Celeste. Committing murder in a very prominent form is the main goal of the game, but the secondary goal is going fast, which means the game has officially certified the cool as fuck award. The speedrunning takes place in this time trials-esque format, where your goal is to make it to the end of the level as fast as possible. There's a separate category for those real gamers who kill all the enemies in that time too, which is called a P rank. I have spent an ungodly amount of hours grinding out the same handful of levels just to skin down my time, as well as P ranking each level on violent. Do I have a life? No. Are you watching a guy talking about speedrunning niche video games on youtube.com with your own free will? Yes, we are the same. ULTRAKILL takes a lot from how Doom innovated not only speedrunning, but video games as a whole. In a way, I find ULTRAKILL to be a response to what Doom did, remedying the parts of it that didn't age so great. Besides it being one of the best games of our current decade, it also feels like the absolute pinnacle example of what makes a game speedrunnable to a more general audience. With the massive climbing popularity of speedrunning, without a doubt there's going to be a lot more fantastic games with fantastic built-in speedrunning modes. And without a doubt I can't wait for them and possibly make another video if you press the little buttons, I don't know. It's such an untapped side of video games purely because of its niche appeal, and I definitely hope devs put a bigger focus on it. But at the end of the day, going fast is just plain old fun, and I need more games to make my attention span worse. Dude, it's so hot. Fuck. Everything's breaking.